Pokémon Next Generation. Fanfiction. Season 1, Part 3. Created by Marcus J. Anthony. Narrated by Jordan Walters. The SS Anne sailed smoothly into Vermilion City Harbor, its white hull gleaming under the sunlight. Marc leaned against the railing, captivated by the sight of water Pokemon playfully diving in and out of the ocean waves. His brothers, equally enthralled, stood behind him, their excitement bubbling over as they anticipated receiving their starter Pokemon. As the ship docked, Mike and Sargent Sarah approached them, alerting them that it was time to disembark. The Masters, exchanging smiles with Sarah, bid farewell at the docks. Sarah, making her way back to the Vermilion City gym, turned to the triplets with an encouraging smile.
Challenge my gym after you get your starter Pokemon,
she suggested. Eager to share their plans, Malcolm cut Marc off. We're heading back to Johto to challenge the gyms there. Sarah wished them luck, and Marc took a moment to express his gratitude. Thank you again for these gloves, he said, holding up the pair that once belonged to her father, Lieutenant Surge. I promise to return them to you someday. With a nod of appreciation, Marc and his brothers stepped onto the Vermilion docks, ready to embark on the next chapter of their Pokemon journey. A Jeep honked, and Mike revealed it was their ride to Pallet Town. The doors swung open, and to Marc's astonishment, none other than Professor Gary Oak stepped out. Marc's jaw fell in disbelief, starstruck at the opportunity to meet a childhood friend and rival of Ash Ketchum. Mike, ever enthusiastic, introduced his boys to Gary, who beamed at the triplets. Thrilled to finally meet you all, he said, honored that they chose him to receive their starter Pokemon from. As the journey to Pallet Town began, Marc remained very shy, barely speaking. His brothers, however, couldn't contain their excitement and bombarded Gary with questions. Malcolm wanted to know all about the grass and bug types Gary had researched, while Maven was eager to hear about Gary's past meetings with Misty, the Kanto champion. The landscape changed as they left Vermilion City, the Jeep cruising along the winding roads. Marc stole glances at Gary, while the rhythmic hum of the engine and the chatter of the brothers filled the air. In the quiet moments between questions, Marc found himself lost in his thoughts, contemplating the journey that lay ahead. They pulled into Pallet Town and Oak Laboratory, the contrast striking when compared to Elm Laboratory. The atmosphere at Oak Lab was serene and tranquil, a departure from the hustle and bustle of their previous encounter. As they stepped inside, a calmness enveloped the living room where retired Professor Samual Oak sat, sipping tea, and engrossed in the art of writing poetry. Warm smiles greeted them, and Professor Oak expressed his delight at seeing Marc Masters again, eager to hear about his latest research. Marc, once more overwhelmed by the presence of the same professor who had given Ash Ketchum his first Pokemon, Pikachu, found himself at a loss for words. In contrast, his brothers were brimming with questions for the seasoned professor, filling the room with their enthusiastic curiosity. In walked one of Gary's assistants, accompanied by a 15-year-old boy whose sour stares seemed directed straight at the triplets. The assistant reassured the boy that it wouldn't be much longer before his Pokemon was ready, emphasizing the need for patience. Gary Oak introduced the boy as Victor, a budding Pokemon trainer with a passion for archaeology. Attempting to ease the tension, Marc extended an invitation for Victor to hang out with them while he waited for his Pokemon. However, Victor, with a snarl, remained silent. It wasn't until he noticed Mike that his demeanor changed. Suddenly, he was honored to meet the well-established researcher. The atmosphere grew tense as Victor directed a cutting remark at the triplets.
I am amazed at the genius spark that lives in Marc Masters. I don't see it in you three.
Malcolm had to hold Maven back from punching Victor, and Marc decided to ignore him. They ascended the stairs, following Gary to the main lab, where a machine held 3 Pokeballs. With a swift toss, Gary unleashed the first one, revealing a playful Squirtle. Maven's joy knew no bounds as he scooped up the Squirtle, dancing exuberantly around the room. Victor, however, couldn't resist muttering,
That Squirtle has no class.
The second Pokeball released a Bulbasaur. Malcolm, blushing but composed, crouched down to the smiling Bulbasaur and extended his hand. a vine slithered out of Bulbasaur's bulb, forming a symbiotic handshake with Malcolm. Victor sneered, remarking,
That Bulbasaur has its head in the clouds.
Mark's heart raced as Gary approached the final Pokeball. With a powerful toss, it exploded open, revealing a Charmander that tumbled over Mark. Catching it in his arms, Mark and Charmander locked eyes for a profound moment. "You're beautiful." Mark couldn't help but express his admiration. In response, Charmander sneezed, releasing black smog that enveloped Mark's face.
That Charmander looks like a sissy. Perfect match, I guess.
Victor's derogatory comment lingered in the air. Rachel Stone entered the lab at that moment, her Eevee perched comfortably on her shoulder. She retorted,
Just because the Charmander is female doesn't mean she's a sissy, stupid boy.
Gary introduced the group to his niece, Rachel, unveiling her aspirations as a Pokemon coordinator. Maven's face lit up at the sight of Rachel, and interestingly enough, so did Squirtle's upon spotting Eevee. Mark, curious, inquired how Rachel knew that his Charmander was female at first glance. Rachel, with a smirk, replied that being an oak had its perks. The lab's tranquility shattered as Anthony Green barged in, amok, hot on his heels. Rachel, who harbored a dislike for poison types, let out a scream and stumbled backward, colliding with Malcolm. In the chaos, Bulbasaur fell into Rachel's lap, provoking another scream. Mark, wide-eyed, asked if the muck belonged to Ash Ketchum, a query Gary confirmed. Overjoyed, Mark leaped into Muck's squishy body, thrilled to meet a Pokemon associated with his hero. Once Rachel had calmed down, she introduced Anthony as her new friend, mentioning that he too was on the brink of receiving his first Pokemon. Victor couldn't resist making more remarks, this time questioning Anthony's age. Rachel swiftly shut him down, instructing Victor to mind his own business. In response, Victor shifted his gaze to Rachel, realizing that she was Rachel Stone, daughter of Stephen Stone, his own hero. He spoke of Stephen in the past tense, expressing his sorrow upon learning of Stephen's passing after the Pokemon War. Anthony, unaware of this revelation, turned to Rachel with a somber expression, grappling with the unexpected news. As the air settled, Professor Samual Oak gracefully changed the subject, reciting a poem that wove through the air, bringing a sense of calmness. Meanwhile, Gary Oak approached Anthony, a Pokeball in hand. Grateful for Anthony's courageous act in saving his niece and his sister's Pokemon, Gary acknowledged that, unfortunately, he was out of Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. However, based on Daisy's glowing recommendation of Anthony, he believed he had selected the perfect partner for him. With a simple toss, Anthony released a young Dratini from the Pokeball. The sight triggered an instant flashback to Daisy's Dragonite, which he had battled against the robber the day before. Gary revealed that this Dratini was, in fact, the offspring of Daisy's Dragonite, expressing his belief that Anthony would become a great Dragonite trainer. The two professors then handed out Rotom phones with installed Pokédexes to Mark, Maven, Malcolm, Victor, and Anthony. Maven, struck by infatuation, couldn't resist questioning Rachel's possession of a Rotom phone, to which she confirmed. Intrigued by the evolution stones she wore on her necklace, Maven asked about their significance. Rachel shared her love for Pokemon that evolve via evolutionary stones and her goal of forming a team around these special evolutions. In response, Maven, ever the enthusiast for water types, complimented Rachel, comparing her eyes to the beauty of a water stone. Mike had to intervene, tactfully moving him away before he could say too much. Gary's assistant re-entered the lab, holding a Pokeball that he handed to Victor, who finally revealed a genuine smile. Attempting to make a swift exit, Victor found himself questioned by Mark. Mark, finding newfound courage, asked why Victor wasn't eager to reveal his partner to the room, especially considering he had plenty to say about everyone else's choices. Gary's suggestion to have the new trainers engage in their first official battles received unanimous agreement, and Mike endorsed the idea. Mark eagerly stepped forward, challenging Victor with Charmander by his side. Victor, brimming with confidence, laughed off Mark's challenge, asserting that his name destined him for victories. Maven, seeking to impress Rachel, accepted Anthony's challenge, leaving Rachel to face Malcolm. Rachel, despite her aversion to battling poison types, agreed to Gary's suggestion, recognizing the importance of overcoming her fear. The group made their way to Oak's expansive landscape, reminiscent of Mike's property in New Barktown. Pokemon roamed freely and Charmander tugged at Mark's shirt, urging him to focus on the impending battle. The first match unfolding with Eevee facing off against Bulbasaur. Rachel directed Eevee to use Quick Attack, catching Bulbasaur off guard. Bulbasaur responded with a growl, momentarily disrupting Eevee's momentum. Vine shot out from Bulbasaur's bulb, smacking Eevee in the face. Bulbasaur lunged for a tackle, but Eevee skillfully evaded with a sand attack. Rachel seized the opportunity, commanding Eevee to use Attract. Bulbasaur's demeanor mirrored Maven's adoration for Rachel as Eevee unleashed a barrage of quick attacks, securing victory. The triumphant sound of cash alerts on Rachel's Rotom phone, and Gary explained the monetary reward for the winner, eliciting excitement from Anthony. Malcolm, disappointed in his loss, couldn't help but feel a twinge of anger toward Maven, who seemed more jubilant for Rachel's success than his own. The following battle featured Dratini against Squirtle. Maven swiftly commanded Squirtle to use Water Gun, catching Dratini off guard with a swift blast. Rachel quickly instructed Anthony to check Dratini's moves in the Pokédex. Anthony then directed Dratini to use Leer, causing Squirtle to pause momentarily. Dratini slithered around Squirtle and ensnared it with Wrap, but Squirtle countered with Withdrawal, its shell proving too resilient to be constricted. The two Pokemon exchanged attacks simultaneously, and both were left unable to battle, resulting in a tied match. A tense atmosphere hung over the battlefield as a nervous Mark stepped forward for his match. Glancing at his Charmander, who seemed equally anxious, he braced himself. Victor, his opponent, confidently tossed his Pokeball, summoning a surprising choice, Kabuto, a revived fossil Pokemon. The group was taken aback by Victor's unique starter, and he proudly explained that he had won an archaeology competition, earning the privilege of receiving a fossil Pokemon from Gary Oak. Victor made it clear that he had earned his Pokemon through hard work, not as a spoiled brat or charity case like some trainers. Realizing the type advantage Kabuto had over Charmander, Mark spoke reassuringly to his partner. "Charlie, I know Kabuto has a type advantage over you, but if what I study on them is correct, they don't learn rock or water type moves at this early level." Victor mocked Mark for nicknaming his Charmander. He then ordered Kabuto to use Scratch. Kabuto, incredibly fast, lunged at Charlie, who, thinking quickly, used Scratch to counter. Both Pokemon flinched back from the exchange. Charlie, following Mark's guidance, continued to scratch Kabuto, but the fossil Pokemon employed Harden, minimizing the damage. Fatigue set in for Charlie, and Kabuto seized the opportunity to use Absorb, draining more energy. In an attempt to turn the tide, Charlie used Growl to make Kabuto stagger and followed up with Ember. Although the fire attack didn't inflict significant damage, Charlie persisted in spitting fire. Kabuto, displaying unexpected agility, launched itself high into the air, using another Absorb while airborne and following it up with Scratch as it descended. Overwhelmed, Charlie was unable to continue the battle. Victor gave Mark an arrogant smirk as he recalled Kabuto to its Pokeball and, without acknowledging the group, exited Oak Laboratory. Mark rushed to Charlie's side, cradling her in his arms. Rachel and Anthony stood over him, offering words of praise for his skill in battle. Mike observed the scene with a smile, saying to Maven and Malcolm, "Looks like Mark made some friends." The unexpected arrival of Delia Ketchum, Ash's mother, brought a wave of surprise to the group. She warmly welcomed the new trainers, offering them freshly baked muffins and wishing them good luck. Excitement bubbled within Mark, and he couldn't resist asking if she could introduce him to his hero, Ash, one day. Delia, with a laugh, suggested there was no time like the present. The group was thrilled, and Delia invited them over to her house for lunch to meet Ash, who had returned home for a brief visit. Mark, overjoyed, had always dreamt of meeting Ash as an experienced trainer, never imagining it would happen on his first day. Before they could head to Delia's house, Samual Oak provided Oran berries for the Pokemon, and the group began walking through the field. However, their plans took a drastic turn when a massive explosion rocked Pallet Town, and they witnessed a tower of smoke rising in the distance. Delia identified it as her house and rushed towards the blaze. The group followed, and upon reaching the scene, they found Delia's house burning. Mr. Mime unconscious across the street, and Rachel ran to its aid. Karaoke and Mike quickly attended to the situation, with Blastoise, Quagsire, and Squirtle aiding in extinguishing the flames. The wails of Delia's cries had Mark shaken. His hero was trapped inside, or worse, dead. In a daring move, he ran into the burning building, with Charlie following closely. Mike tried to chase after them, but debris collapsed and barricaded the entrance. Mark and Charlie didn't know what part of the house they stood in, but they could hear voices, so followed them. They emerged out into the backyard, where they encountered a mysterious woman dressed in a strange black spacesuit, half of her face covered with a mask. An aircraft appeared out of the smoke with a ladder descending.
Target has been secured. Over and out.
The woman said to an electronic device she held. Mark demanded answers about Ash, but the woman laughed. In a defensive move, Charlie used Ember. The woman tossed a Pokeball and released a Swoobat, which retaliated with Air Slash. Hydro Pump struck the Swoobat as Blastoise and Quagsire stood guard over Mark and Charlie. The woman returned the Swoobat before a ladder fell from the aircraft for her to grip. They ascended above the smoke and rocketed through the clouds within seconds. The smoke grew too thick, and Mark collapsed, his eyes falling into the darkness.
Target has been secured. Over and out.